Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Podcana episode 65. This week is just me and Moyen as we talk about set 5 decks. What are the best decks currently circulating in the metagame? We don't have a lot of data to go off, but we do have one tournament that we'll be looking towards, as well as our own internal testing. It is a weird time in Lorcana, and I wonder if this will consistently happen, because right now you have a bit of a split in the community. Largely, the Lorcana community is going to be playing with the new cards, playing with the set 5 decks, and having fun. And then a lot of the competitive players are going to be playing with the set 4 cards and maybe preparing for Toronto. And it's like this weird
and also
split.
Having fun.
Yeah.
They can also have fun still. I would have fun.
It's fun, right? But it feels weird because you feel like it's you do feel left out on the new metagame, and it does feel like it is not a good idea to be playing with the new cards. I do think that, Flesh and Blood kind of tossed us up a few times in the past where they were like, oh, there's a set release happening very close to a tournament. Is that okay? Will people get cards? Ultimately, what it came down to is that the people who are attending the tournament can get cards, and the availability is there. I know Lorcana did have some supply issues at some time, but I do hope that we move towards making these tournaments current with the set that is out. Even if it's like a week before, I do think that players will be able to get cards and everything will be okay. Because what you also end up with this is the coverage is inherently less interesting to the general player base because it's not with the cards that they're playing. It doesn't represent their local metagame. We kind of play this dead meta. From a competitive standpoint, honestly, no problem. No problem. Because, it's fun to play. It really doesn't matter if it's current or it's not current. It's like it is a hyper-competitive environment, and whatever cards you say we can or we can't play with, whatever. We're going to play and we're going to have fun.
Plus, from a competitive standpoint, this is actually one of the better metas to play because it's like a one tournament only meta where maybe you can get a little bit of a bigger edge in deck building, with the Irada of Bucky at least being in play already.
Yeah, exactly. So I think moving forward, I do hope that they move it to just current, up to date, like whatever set is out. That would be fun. It would be how fun would it be if this was a set 5 tournament, and there was like this scramble to figure out what the best deck was? Because if you think back to set 4, set 3, and I'm sure set 2 to an extent, every single time we've had these emerging best decks, week 1 that I feel like have just been terrible. Ultimately, they just did not play out as the best deck, and everybody was like, oh, you got a ban Jafar and like all of this stuff. So I would love to see people put their money where their mouth is and fly all the way to Toronto and bring their Jafar deck and get stomped.
Yeah, that would have been fun. Imagine first tournament, everyone brings Jafar, and like there's almost no Jafar in Top Cut.
But anyway, we're going to be not focusing too much on Toronto this week. We're going to be focusing on that next week, most likely, because Kawa will be back joining us, and Kawa is playing the tournament as well. So this week's going to be mostly the set 5, its impact, and the current decks we've seen so far. Set 5 is also very interesting because it is not the first set, but it is kind of the first set in modern Lorcana that we do not get to play with Pixelborn, and Pixelborn is a massive tool when it comes to understanding the impact of a set, developing a metagame, and all of that. So right now we have this very limited information in regards to testing and how many games we can play. Like, yes, you can play on Tabletop Simulator, you can play in paper, but there's not millions of games have been played day 1 of the set coming out. We're not grinding it out in lab, and we're not pushing for rank 1. So our information will be slightly subpar to what it has been in the past, but there is a silver lining there. It does mean that there's more room for innovation. There's more room to kind of break it open, and we'll be getting into that. Anyway, let's head into the headlines, Moyen. The headlines are: we have one tournament result. This is from, oh man, is this in Germany? What's this word?
Battlebär?
No, release event.
Oh. Himmelsleuchten.
Himmelsleuchten. We have a tournament result here. So this is 42 players. We have our top 8, and it consists of 3 Amber Steel, 2 Emerald Amber, 1 Blue Steel, 1 Emerald Sapphire. Ooh, that could be one we're cooking up. And 1 Steel Amethyst. Moyen, any lists here that stood out to you in particular, and what did you think about the general metagame breakdown, consisting of almost all steel decks?
Yeah, I think in general people were extremely scared of hyper aggro yellow purple, but it doesn't have a single. I don't think it had a single top 8 appearance in that particular tournament. And I think while the deck's powerful, I personally I think that Ember Steel will just kind of push it out of the meta to some extent. And I think Ember Steel is really, really powerful right now. So I'm not surprised by that at all. And then the rest having some of each. Ember Emerald showing up twice is somewhat surprising, but I think that's just the biggest takeaway. Maybe Ember Steel for now is emerging as the first deck to beat. But I don't think it's so powerful for the reasons that you might have expected when looking at all the cards and card evaluations. I think there's the cards people were highest on that could have been great in Ember Steel as well are Pete and Naveen. And I think so far most competent Ember Steel players that I've talked to are actually kind of low on both of those cards, where they might consider playing a few of them, but neither of them are really 4-offs in a lot of Ember Steelers that I'm seeing. So the biggest change really is just, okay, you slot in the Daisy Duck, and now your deck is good against aggressive decks anyways, but on top of that, you actually have a way to pressure a lot quicker once you get a tempo swing against some of the slower decks.
Yeah, so it kind of sounds like Daisy Duck was kind of that key card for Amber Steel that has started to push it over the edge. What are your thoughts on Sapphire Steel? I felt like that was one of the biggest winners from the previous set. I mean, honestly, it was Sapphire in general, but I really thought Sapphire Steel might be able to kind of take it to the next level. Do you think that Amber Steel is going to be able to edge out something like Sapphire Steel? Because, I do believe that Ruby Sapphire is going, like, they would struggle into the Daisy Duck, just inherently. Like, that's going to be a card that's quite good against Ruby Sapphire. And it is good against any Sapphire deck, but if any Sapphire deck can deal with it, it's probably going to be Steel Sapphire. So what are your thoughts on Steel Sapphire?
I actually think it's the other way around, because in set 4, the best tech Ember Steel could have against Sapphire Steel was actually Golden Harp, because it's a 1/4, and for Steel, a damage-based removal, that's pretty hard to deal with. It gets to quest a couple times, and it's inefficient to take out, where Ruby Sapphire is usually worse against aggression, but it might be better dealing with Daisy Duck if it just builds in a different way where now it goes. Instead of using Beep Prep as their main board game, maybe they just use the human Sisu and shift Sisu line. And so they also have some ways to deal with the aggression. The one of the problem is, for example, I think one of the most powerful cards Sapphire got was Chicha. But Chicha is okay against aggro, but it's really not good against Ember Steel. So that's something Ember Steel can punish. And I think comes time, the Sapphire deck should be able to adapt in a way where they can get a close matchups against Ember Steel as well. The problem is, I think Ember Steel is it's much easier to build Ember Steel in a way where it's like, okay, I'm the one asking the questions, and I don't care so much about what the current meta is, whereas I think Sapphire, it will take a little bit more time to get more refined deck lists.
Yeah, that 4 willpower does seem like a problem for Steel. I wonder if something like Gaston and Ruby that would already be in that Ruby Sapphire list to kind of deal with Flynn anyway is a decent answer. Maybe not. I mean, maybe just as good as it gets, right? You're a 4/2, you kind of trade up on that, or you 2-for-1 to an extent.
Yeah, so it has been one direction lots of Ruby Sapphire decks have been going in. And while it's great against Ruby Amethyst and aggro, the problem is, what if you play against Ember Steel and they can both play early singers into Stormage on plus the aggression? And I think that's really where you can struggle into.
Interesting. All right. Overall, looking at the top 8 of this tournament, what's your takeaway? Like, if you were gonna look at the results of this tournament and have to play a tournament next weekend, what kind of takeaways would you have from this top 8?
I mean, the biggest takeaway would be, okay, if I bring a deck, it probably shouldn't lose to Ember Steel. So I think whatever deck I would cook up, I would keep in mind, okay, I need at least a very playable matchup against Ember Steel with Daisy Duck that maybe slots in P2. So something I've tried a bit, but it will still take a lot of time and testing, is like, how does item heavy Queen type Ruby Sapphire list look? Because they can maybe leverage the Scuttle a bit better with Ruby Chromicon. They can play Gaston to counter Daisy. It's just a little bit more difficult against Daisy and Ember Steel. And then you have the human Sisu package for later in the game, for really dealing with the aggression without playing into Pete. And later in the game, you also have a really good win condition in the Sheriff of Nottingham, I think, if you can set up the card draw in time.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, let's jump into the spilled ink section. This is our listener question section. If you have your question read on next week's podcast, you can shoot us a comment on YouTube. And we will start off the first one here with Lorcana Villain. Great watch. Love everything you guys do. Thanks so much for the kind words. Yeah, we were talking about the EU production value last week, which I do think is very far and ahead of North America. Not in a bad way. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, but I did turn on the EU coverage and I was like, oh my goodness, this is like, it felt like Pokemon levels of production value. I don't know if you've ever watched a Pokemon tournament. I don't play that game, but if you ever turn on a Pokemon competitive tournament on Twitch or something like that, you will be blown away. It is ridiculous how good the production value is. Kind of reminds me of, as well, if you've ever watched the Japanese coverage for One Piece. Just absolutely crazy. They do some tricky stuff with the camera angles and stuff. It's crazy.
And then you can also play on stream without all the without the constant hand shuffling, because you have to actually put them down and then
yeah.
So I do like that a lot. I also did I think hour 20 hour 30 interview with Lorcana Villain this week about also going deep on my tournament prep again. So big shout out to him.
Next one is from Joseph. They say, I think the biggest question people need to ask about Tipo that nobody really is would I play 8 OJ and Ruby Sapphire? And I think based upon the power level of 4 drops on turn 3, the answer is yes. Games where you don't ramp on 2 versus games where you do are very, very different. And this card being inkable lets you chuck it away after turn 2 for ink. Thoughts on Tipo? We thought we were pretty high on it last week.
I think this I'm a little bit lower on Tipo than I used to be, because the extra card hurts quite a bit, even if you have this 1/2 body on the board. But it enabled some new ways to build the deck, I think, because you don't have to have these emergency cards in your deck for if you miss one jump, because you can just say, okay, I play 4/1 jump for Tipo, I'm super likely to have either one on turn 2, and then I just build my deck in a way where I don't play 3 drops, I just go to 4 ink on turn 3. And that is, I think, where its strength really lies. Just one thing I want to add, because Ruby Sapphire is kind of hard to build right now, because we have all these tools. We have extra turn 2 ramp, but we also have Chicha. But Chicha is strong, but very different to ramping on turn 2. So there's another way you can try to build Ruby Sapphire, which I think I've also done in the Ruby Sapphire list that we'll link in the description, which is actually this was without a Chicha, but in a normal stock red-blue, I think you could also maybe build it in a way where you say, okay, the meta is quite aggressive right now. I don't play 1 jump or Tipo. I just go Chicha on turn 2 into Quill as my main ramping draw engine type of tool. And then against decks where I need to fend off against aggression, maybe instead I go Gaston on 2 and then play Human Sisu on 3 and just go a little bit without ramping.
Remind me what this Chicha card does.
Chicha is an uninkable 2/1 with support, quests for 1, and it says every time when you ink a card, if it was the second card you ink this turn, you actually draw a card. So if you just go Chicha into Quill, you can, as long as Chicha is alive, you can ink 2 cards from hand and draw a new card. And then even against aggressive decks, you might think, oh, maybe that's too slow, but you can just play Chicha on 2, play Quill on 3, ramp, draw 1 card, and then trade off the Chicha if that's necessary. Also, the support, depending on what other cards you play, might help you take out an earlier Daisy Duck. But I wish, so there's a new card in red that almost would help it immensely to deal with aggro, but the problem is it's uninkable. There's an uninkable 1-drop that's Reckless with a 2/3 stat line. I think if that was inkable, an inkable 2/3 Reckless would help a lot and could play into this support idea. But an uninkable Reckless 1-drop is really difficult to include.
Yeah. I remember Chicha now. Chicha was a card that we talked about in the preview podcast, and I quickly changed my mind as I thought about it more. It does seem very powerful with the interaction with Fishbone Quill in particular. Just seems pretty crazy. So that's a card I'm very excited to play with, to be honest. Next one is from Doctor. They say, congrats, Moyen. Also in regarding side events / engaging on day 2, Toronto will be having Canada's biggest Comic-Con just across the street that weekend, which may pull even more people away from side events. I don't think that's really a downside, to be honest. So when we were in Atlanta, they had MomoCon, which I think is the biggest. I don't know what you would call that con. It's kind of like general stuff. It's kind of an anime con. It's kind of it's so many things. People dress up. It's huge, absolutely massive. I've never seen so many people in one place. It was unbelievable. But yeah, I think people being pulled away from side events isn't necessarily a bad thing. Side events, people are really grinding side events right now in Lorcana challenges because the expected value is there. That will change, just a supply thing, and that's okay. So side events will become more of what they actually are, which is just a casual thing that you can engage in on day 2 if you want to have some fun. So yeah, it's not really a downside for me.
Yeah. Right now, often the internal debate of players that are no longer in the main event is, do I go around in the city, enjoy my day, maybe go to the pool, or do I do the higher EV thing and actually grind out side events? But usually that's only something people consider a lot because the EV is there. So if there's something nice to do, it generally probably makes for better experience.
I believe that nerds generally underestimate the expected value of life experience and like just hanging out in the city and seeing a new place and like for me,
what is life?
Yeah. You should definitely, if you're traveling somewhere new, you should definitely go check it out on that day 2 and not grind for like $100. It's not worth.
It's so when I played Hearthstone and I qualified to my first bigger tournaments and I went to LA, Vegas, Korea, everything. And then when I came back home, people asked me if I liked the city. I'm like, yeah, I saw the hotel and the venue, and that's all.
Yeah.
Like
I saw the hotel, the venue, everywhere. I Uber Eats to McDonald's.
I couldn't tell you if I liked the city.
Yeah, that is not uncommon. All right, next one is from RST Will. They say, I appreciate your unbiased view on the cards. As a newer TCG player, your pool of knowledge and opinions on cards are invaluable. Keep up the great work. Yeah, we do. You know what's funny is like if you're a newer Podcana listener, you don't know about the early days. We used to do card evaluations. Man, we got like people would get angry. Do you remember like set 2? I think it was either set 2 or set 3. Like, oh man, our entire
I remember some like 0 to hero bibbidi bobbidi boo stuff where we got roasted. But I think in general we're probably one. I mean, we're just a podcast that doesn't. That I think that we're. Okay, I don't want to call others dishonest, but I think we're trying to stay very honest. And we value that more than hyping up some cards. That doesn't mean, I don't know, that doesn't mean that we don't get excited about new cards. But we still try to stay reasonable in evaluating them for a competitive format.
Yeah, you can also be wrong. It's just funny to me, the evolution of the Podcana comment section where I am serious. It was like basically our entire section would be people like, you're so wrong about this. I can't believe you hate all the cards. It was like, and then they would just be talking about cards that never saw play. I mean, I remember when those people were like ripping us apart in Discord and just like, oh man.
There was some quotes like, oh, I can't imagine, I can't remember a single card I've agreed on with them. But I think of course, we are not correct on everything. I don't think that's possible. But I think we have a good track record so far.
Except in set 2, I think we actually were correct on everything.
Yeah,
set 2 we nailed. Set 2 we nailed for sure. But now the comment section is a bunch of nice people. It's wild. All right, next one is Arcane. They say, Spilled Ink. Just wondering if your rating for Hideaway changes at all if you consider it for inking your own items. So to say possible secondary 1-jump in turn 2. Also, another card I think should get a second look is Remember Who You Are when running Amber Aggro. Daisy fills your opponent, fill their hand as you dump your hand by 3 or 4, then refill to a huge hand. This Remember Who You Are is like, that was the most contentious card. There were so many people in the comment section being like, this card is actually good. You guys are wrong about this card, etc., etc. That was the main one.
I don't think. I really think there's a chance it's okay. It's like I'm still not too high on it, but if you build your deck around it in a very aggressive way, maybe it can work. I've also experimented a bit with Emerald, Sapphire, where you ink a lot of cards and then you draw back with Clarabelle. And drawing back with Clarabelle is so much more efficient than with Remember Who You Are, but maybe Remember Who You Are can also fit that deck. And so my biggest concern is if you dump your hand in the first 4-ish turns and then you play Remember Who You Are, yes, getting the card drawback's nice, but maybe that's still less impactful than just playing another character because you do take a little bit of tempo off. But I'm open to being wrong about Remember Who You Are. I think the card could end up being fine.
This card is so weird to me. I mean, I don't know why people like have all the cards that were spoiled. This is the one that people want to. This is kind of the hill that people want to die on. It just seems like everything about this card, agnostic of context. I know context is relevant. It's just so bad. Like 4 costs, uninkable. Okay, that's rough. And then it's an action, not a song. Okay, that's rough. And then it's like, are people factoring in that if you use this card to draw up cards to what your opponent has in hand, that you also discard this card? So with X-1 is what you're drawing at the very least. Like you have to get rid of this.
Sure, card. But every draw card.
Yeah, but I guess so you're right. So yeah, I don't know. Just 4 cost. I don't know.
I mean, how many cards do you want to draw with this? Like 3?
Yeah.
At least?
3. I guess 3 at least, but it just seems like... But then also, if you ever have it in hand or you have 2, like, you're just cooked. It's over, right?
I mean, yeah, you draw at least 1 less and you're, like, very sad. So it's like... Yeah, that's also the thing. This card, it tells you have to build your deck around this, because if you don't build your deck around it, it's awful. But if you build your deck around it, maybe you get a great Remember Who You Are. But then if you build your deck around it, you want to play lots of these, and it's anti-synergetic with itself. So, yeah, I actually see some potential in the card, but I think it's important to highlight the issues with the card.
I think it's overcosted, and it's like, it should maybe be a song.
If this was, I mean, if it was a song, I think it could be extremely powerful, but I think it could have been inkable action at least, and to be all right.
Yeah. I mean, people do think it is extremely powerful. That seems to be the sentiment. It's like, I don't know, it is the card of set 5 that has come through in the comment section. I mean, like, okay, this scenario, this card is good. And it's like, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's fine.
So actually, in the Emerald Sapphire deck that we will link down below, I did put in one, but it's like the worst Clarabelle. But I guess sometimes you don't draw the Clarabelle and then you want it as card draw potentially.
Yeah, this card just seems I'm actually like, so this is one of the cards where I feel like I mentioned this and you're like, okay, I'll come back on it, maybe it could be good. This is one where
but you will double down.
Yeah, I would double down on this. I feel like this card is genuinely quite bad. And I'm sure I'm happy to be wrong on it, but there's so many red flags with this card, particularly 4 cost uninkable and the action part of it. And then also, I mean, if you draw, just ever having multiple of these is so rough, and it's like inherently a dead card in your hand till like the very specific scenario. Just seems like a tough card. All right, next is from Bill. Spilled question. I played in my first sealed event for Lorcana this past weekend, and I want to get your opinion on the play/draw choice in limited formats. I come from an MTG background where draft is faster and you almost always want to play, but sealed is slower and you might want to draw depending on the set. With Shimmering Skies, I felt like I wasn't getting enough tempo to play. I was really missing that one extra card advantage that's hard to come by. Oh, that's interesting. I haven't played Shimmering Skies sealed, but I cannot fathom that you would choose to draw. Could you?
Yes, I could, but my sealed and drafting experience isn't big, but I've played at UK Games Expo from set 4 in draft, and I built a deck full of overstated low questing characters, and I would actually I wasn't sure on it, but I could very much entertain the fact, and I think I ended up choosing to go second a few times because that extra card was generally more impactful, and there wasn't a good way to really get ahead in tempo, because I could just pass a few turns, play a 4-cost 3/6 into a 5-cost 4/7, and just clean up the board in time and stabilize from there. I still had to ink quite a bit to get to that. So, and then at some point, both decks would generally also stop inking. And at that point, you can also catch up. And yeah, there wasn't so many aggressive curves. So I think depending on what cards you get and the format, I haven't played draft or sealed in set 5 yet. I can entertain the thought of going second.
Yeah, so I played a few drafts, which is definitely higher powered than sealed. And I guess a lot of my deck did cantrip. That's why my draft deck was very powerful. But it felt like the the ink advantage and the turn advantage was more powerful than it was in constructed. Because I already in constructed Lorcana, I feel like the removal is overcosted and generally bad. Like that is just a thing I believe about Lorcana removal. It's not good, which is why you can feel the pain of being behind. Because like, let's say a beast tragic hero comes down on turn 5, it's so much different if they pass back over you and you are going into your turn 5 versus you're going into your 6 ink and you have the Medusa answer. Like it is just so much different. I found that to be even more impactful in limited because I would drop like some bomb or some pushed character that was either a 5 cost or a 6 cost or even a 3 cost, and my opponent just like literally couldn't answer it. There's just nothing they could do, and I was just multiple turns ahead, and that would just happen again and again and again. It just felt like the 5 drops were so much more powerful than the 4 drops, and the 6 drops are so much more powerful than the 5 drops. Just on average, when you talk about limited card quality, I felt like the advantage of going first is even more. So the different, like in Magic, I think that you have like a lot better removal and you have a lot better sort of control cards. You can also play at instant speed sometimes. So, it might be better when you're going second, this wouldn't happen in limited because they don't print that card in limited, but your 2-mana counterspell can counter their 3 and then you trade up 2 for 2 mana for 3. And then you go into your turn 3 and you deploy something. So there's it's way different in my opinion than if you're playing this asymmetric, I go, you go. And then also this resource system where you just ink every time and almost every card can be inked every time. It's not like the Magic system where someone can, miss a land or it's just way more consistent. And then I feel like being an ink ahead on your opponent is very, very powerful. I could see how you could break the mold of that, of having this low cost aggressive deck. But I think in a standard mid-range deck, I would always choose to go first. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think I already gave all my thoughts on that. That's all I can say.
Did I change your mind?
No, but it's like I don't think you always want to go second. I think I just think with some decks, with this, maybe you didn't get a lot of cantrips. If you just play some medium-sized big characters, I think sometimes you might want to go second.
So I think it's interesting. So I ask you, is it ever correct to go second in constructed?
No.
Why?
Well, because I think that decks are more powerful and capable of pushing the advantage of having that ink point first, much more than a sealed or draft deck can.
Okay, so that would be the distinction, is that because the decks are less powerful and less consistent, that they can't push the ink advantage as much?
Yeah, so it's like, I think it's easier to come back from the disadvantage of getting to an ink point first if your opponent is doing mediocre threats. And it's not even that you remove them, you just let the mediocre threats sit for 1 or 2 turns, play your own bigger characters with the extra card advantage you have, and maybe recover from there.
So I do agree with you that I believe the card advantage is king in limited for Lorcana. So that would be in line with maybe choosing to go second because you do get the extra card.
So at least it's an interesting decision, I think, in limited format, which it's not in constructed.
In Flesh and Blood, it's often it's like overwhelmingly right to go second limited sometimes. It's just funny.
No, I didn't know.
Yeah. All right. Next up is from Filming Spilding question. You guys, of course, have pointed out the similarities between Lorcana and chess, and I agree that there are many, from different opening strategies to considering multiple responses to lines of play mid-game and the calculated race that occurs at the end of the game. Chess has, of course, long passed the point where computers are much better than any human player. So my question is, do you think this is hypothetically possible in Lorcana? Brennan has talked about that there being a hidden true value of each card in a given metagame. Suppose you could input anticipated metagame, have the computer calculate the best possible deck and to bring based on this, and maybe even play the deck as well. I doubt we ever get this technology, but I'm interested if you guys think this is possible and how good card game AI could eventually become.
Yeah, I think it would be better than all of us.
Yeah, I think especially in perpetuity, if you're like, because you didn't really give us a timeline. If you're like, oh, would it happen in the next year? I don't know. But if you're like, yeah, the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years, I think that technology would 1000% be there. It's not like the game isn't that nuanced. Even if it was, I think we see examples of the current editions of AI being able to capture a lot of nuance and be able to do very nuanced things.
No, it's nuanced enough where it's extremely complicated to play perfectly all the micro decisions for a human being. But I think for something like an AI, I think all of these decisions can be assigned values, and they can definitely, I think, quickly get better than us if someone is really interested enough in both AI and Lorcana. I think they could make that happen.
I think it'd be very challenging. I also think that I don't know, but I would assume the technology is not there yet, because I would look at a company like Second Dinner, which has a game called Marvel Snap, which makes over $100 million a year and has probably one of the dumbest AIs I've ever seen in my life, where they don't update it for years at a time, and it's just like terrible.
I don't know. Maybe it's. I mean, they probably don't want the AI to keep crushing noobs.
Bro, I don't even think they have an AI. I think they just they copy some decks at some point in time, and then they just have it on. I think they have a system that has there's no like machine learning going on at all. I think they should. It's so fucking bad.
Yeah, they just have some rules after and they act up within those rules.
Marvel Snap is the epitome of I don't know, it's a good game, but there's the crazy level of incompetence that goes on. It's just unbelievable. I digress. All right, Cameron, how important is it to have an immediate answer to Daisy Duck? I see people absolutely bending over backwards to answer it. Is it a must answer like Diablo? No. Not like Diablo.
No, because I think the card advantage is much better at winning the game than the early lore can be. And so when Diablo sticks, they gain every turn a 3-cost singer or 1 lore and at least 1 card draw per turn. When Daisy Duck sticks, okay, it only costs 1, but technically Diablo sometimes only costed 1 ink, because that's all that you often spend 3 cards, but 1 ink to get it into play with shifting it. So when Daisy Duck sticks, every turn there's a decent chance you get a card, and they gain 2 lore. So that it's not easy to remove for its cost, and often it will gain some lore, but you will get some card advantage. Maybe it helps you keep the other stuff in check first and then deal with the Daisy a bit later. I think you can still totally recover from dealing with Daisy on turn 3, turn 4. Because a lot of the time people were going out of their way to find, how do I answer this on turn 2? And I don't think you need to. When you're on the play turn 2, it's not even exerted yet. And it's something you want to be responding to, but I think you don't have to bend over backwards.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we see the rise of Gaston and Ruby, the 2-cost Gaston, the 4/2 Reckless. I don't know if it's actually the best answer. It might just be. It is a good answer. Don't get me wrong, but Daisy Duck might not be impactful enough that you need to run this bad card in your deck. But I do think that that's going to be an immediate answer we see out of Ruby, because it has the the additional upside of having coverage against Flynn Rider.
Mm-hmm. So I think so for one example for how crazy people were about Daisy, it's they started thinking about a 1-cost 2/1 with support into Queen of Hearts on 2. And okay, we don't have to play all of these cards to answer it with turn 2. But I think Gaston's a fair shout. It's just susceptible to let the Storm Rage on. Other than that, any Amethyst deck that just plays Fox on 3, they'll be fine dealing with it.
Yeah, Fox. Turn 3. Fox is going to be a great answer.
The Human Sisu on turn 3, it will be fine, because I think that's also an okay card in general in that type of deck, if with the shift option and ice blocks. So those are some I think more efficient answers to deal with it turn 3 instead of turn 2.
Did you mention the uninkable CC there? Did you say that? Yeah. That's a super clean answer. Anyway, let's hop into the main topic. If you want to get a question read out in next week's podcast, shoot us a comment on YouTube and we'll get it queued up. So this week's main topic is set 5 decks, and we're going to be always, sometimes, like a description for links to decks. most of the time. This time for sure, though. Let's talk about Ruby Sapphire. So you have Ruby Sapphire items here. You call it Ruby Sapphire no action. Talk to me about the sort of ethos of this deck. And oh man, I see our boy. I see our big 9-cost boy. He's not. He's a 9-cost, right?
Yeah, but he's not really a 9-cost. So basically, there's two ideas behind why. I mean, there's a few ideas why maybe the item version of Red Blue could be the better one coming Shimmering Skies. One is because you don't take a turn off to ramp. You actually just play a character turn 2, play a character turn 3. Unless you want to quill turn 3. So you could do something like Scuttle into Queen, or Gaston into Queen, or any Scuttle or Gaston into the human Sisu. On top of that, it got an extra way to leverage the Scuttle with the Ruby Chromicon, where a potential 2-3 trading into something is much more relevant after the Scuttle is left behind when it's cycled itself. And then very big one is, I think, if we see a decent amount of Pete in the meta, this just completely gets around that. So in a meta where Ursula Deceiver, but also Pete, maybe Bare Necessities are seeing lots of play, this is trying to have its removal. I mean, this is not playing any action, so it completely gets around the hate against action, just with strength-based removal in 3-cost Sisu, 8-cost Sisu, also Medusa, and then quickly also setting up its own win condition with lots of item on the board into Tamatoa, Sheriff of Nottingham, Lucky Dime. So to me, I think there's also other ways to build Red Blue with T-Pro and 1-jump, or instead of T-Pro 1-jump, you just go Chicha Quill, build it that way. But to me, in a more aggressive meta with maybe Pete's and Ursulas, but also the Daisy Ducks, I think the item build could be strong. And this is just somewhat of an initial build and testing that I think can still change a lot.
Question: do you think we could ever have a Sapphire Steel item build?
Yes, I mean, I tried it. It is very, very strong if you don't pressure it in the first few turns. With 8 1-cost items that cantrip, you can also play it in a Queen-type Sheriff build. The problem is that in general, this Queen item-heavy build, it does take some time off to set up this win condition in Queen, Maurice's Workshop, etc. And there's also the Magnifying Glass from the new set, which is a 2-cost inkable item that I think says tap 2 to look at the top 3 cards of your deck, and you may reveal an item put into your hand. So it also has like an item that draws cards when you're out of cards. Maybe as like a backup option. But the problem is, okay, you're taking these turns off. How do you recover back the board? And if Daisy Duck is part of the aggression, I don't know if this blue steel can really recover quickly enough. But if the meta gets a bit slower, I think this can very quickly set up some very cheap Sheriffs of Nottingham, some good draw engine. So if that happens to be the case, I think there's also some potential there.
Yeah, I guess it'd be quite susceptible to aggro, but that would be the idea, is you play a bit more of like a solitaire S deck that just is kind of trying to combo out via these items. With, you could have some interaction via combat, and maybe you could have some single target remove or some removal in steel. But I would say probably just fully focus on like the solitaire, like turbo draw, combo your opponent out. I don't think it works in actuality because you need a lot of ink, but I think we're getting there. We're moving in that direction where we're going to get some sort of a combo item deck. There's also that Ariel that just untaps every time you play an item, which I wonder if it will ever be good. I think it's from like set 1 or set 2.
Yeah, I've tried that in previous sets with Eye of the Fates, and then it quests for a little bit more each time you untap it, but yeah, it's a very, very slow combo.
Yeah. All right. Next up, we have Amber Steel. This seems to be the emerging best deck of the format, just based off the top 8 of the single tournament we have from Germany. Nevertheless, we talked about what has pushed Amber Steel over the line has been that Daisy Duck. What other additions have made it into the deck, and how has the gameplay changed?
Well, sometimes Pete and sometimes Naveen make it in. I think those are some of the big ones. So it has some action disruption, but also the Naveen, I think people are really split on. At the start, it was sometimes included 4 times. Now people are more giving it like 2-ish slots in the deck, because while there's situations where it's powerful, they actually end up occurring less often than what one might think. As for Naveen to be good, you need to have it needs to like fit your turn. You need to have an action that you want to be playing this turn, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it doesn't happen that often, especially considering that turn 3 you often set up an Ariel, or if you're playing it a Gaston. So you often play a Singer 5 turn 3. So you already have a Singer in play that can sing one of these big songs that you might be wanting to sing. So if that's already the case, maybe for Naveen to now be good turn 4, you kind of need to have 2 songs that you want to be playing this turn. So it's definitely more niche than maybe you could have first expected, and it doesn't cheat out that many resources in comparison to just playing a Singer 5 on turn 3, then playing a few cheaper cards turn 4, then singing Holy World, something like that. That being said, if your Singer 5 that you play turn 3 gets removed, maybe you play Ariel, pick Holy World, it gets brawled, and then you go Naveen Holy World anyways, I think that's potentially where it also could shine. But yeah, I think it's not good often enough for wanting to include this uninkable maybe 3 or 4 times. I think actually a big winner of Ember Steel is, okay, people are always every time I say, okay, the biggest winner is like a card that we already had before, but the context matters so much. And for example, set 4, I think there was a pod where I said best card of set 4 is Queen's Castle, because with this new different context, decks got so bad against, like, didn't get better, they actually got kind of worse against Queen's Castle. And so this time, I think, with how I expect the meta to change for now, Ariel, the shift Ariel could get a lot better. Because I would assume we have a little bit more steel in the meta. I think Amber Steel is a great deck in the meta. Right. This is a great card in the Ember Steel meta.
Help us out though with because some people are going to be listening to this and they're like, "What shift Ariel is he talking about?" Hit us with the archaic knowledge of what shift Ariel is.
Okay, so shift Ariel is a 6 cost with shift 4, and it's a 3/8 where whenever it costs for 2, and it says whenever you play a song, you may pay 2 ink to deal 3 damage to chosen character. So if that doesn't get removed, it's a great deal. It's difficult to remove, especially for non-Ruby decks. It's great at grabbing a hold onto the board and really pushing that advantage and not letting your opponent recover ever. And so I think Ember Steel being popular, or me expecting Ember Steel to be popular, is one reason why this will be good. In Ember Steel, if World's Greatest Criminal Mind was in the meta, that kind of pushed out Cinderella to be the mirror winning card. So if that doesn't exist, also Cinderella is a fair shout to try to win the mirrors, but that's not even possible for Ariel. And on top of that, a big if Pete stays, or if Pete will be popular, which I'm not sure about yet, but it's possible. One great playline is in the mirror, where if you go Ariel and they on let's say on the play you go Ariel on turn 3, and they just play Pete to stop you from singing the song, and then Pete really needs to make you have a bad turn for Pete to be good. But if you then just go shift Ariel, they just play the 3/3 that quests for 1, and you have this big Ariel in play that will never be removed, and that just wins you the game. So the timing of this being able to come down turn 4 immediately after your opponent blocked your actions turn 3, I think there's also a lot of value in that in the mirror.
Yeah, so Ariel was a very hyped card when it came out. I remember this card actually sparked the discussion of if Madame Medusa should be banned, because we were seeing all these really cool cards, and it was just like, this card is unplayable in the previous meta, because the previous meta was dominated by Ruby Sapphire and Ruby Amethyst. But I do agree with you. I'm excited to see some play out of this card. I wonder if this card is going to have like some sort of like be pretty annoying for whoever gets to land this first, because it does seem like it's gonna just completely take over the board.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how many copies you can include, because again, if against Ruby meta decks, if they still stay in the meta, which they probably do in some way or another, you don't want to play a lot of these cards, because you kind of have to ink them in that matchup to not just get blown out. But I think at least a few copies will probably see play numbers still.
All right, let's head to Sapphire Steel here. I know we've talked about it a little bit already, but just talk me through some of the new cards. I do see the Donald Duck in there, which I'm particularly interested in. I also see the Kuzco, which is a card that I thought was overrated in spoiler season. I don't think it's bad, but yeah, it was. I mean, remember people saying like, "Oh, Sapphire Steel is unlocked," and I was like, "What?" I definitely don't agree with that, but I am particularly interested in the Chicha as well as the Donald Duck.
Yes. So this is a very this build. It's not going crazy with new cards. It's kind of building on what we already have. So it's not this crazy sheriff idea that we talked about earlier. It's just very similar Sapphire Steel, but instead of playing, let's say, Argis or Magic Boom, now your second 2-drop, except as me, is the Chicha, which, if it doesn't get removed, Chicha into Quill will be an absolute nightmare for people to deal with. And then it also plays the Donald Duck, which I think those two cards greatly help the deck, and Cusco maybe slightly helps it. So let's talk about Donald. I think the best part about Donald is it gives you a great 5-drop to ramp into to sing songs with, because I tried to get around it by in set 4 by building it with Gaston instead of like Ariel, but other than that, sometimes an issue Sapphire Steel had in set 4 was that if you ramped into the cards and sang a song with them, they left up a bad body and didn't have an underplay. So Donald Duck gets around that. Imagine you go Mickey or Quill into Cogsworth and then sing a song. Now your Cogsworth gets Married and you're like, okay, my 5-drop didn't do anything else than singing a song, and it left up a bad body behind. Okay, it wasn't easy to remove Cogsworth before it sang. That's one thing about it. And same with Ariel. It's a 3/4, and if you then use it to sing, it didn't do anything. But Donald Duck, a 3/4 quest for 2 body, it's nothing too special, but I think it's very respectable. Questing for 2 is very important. 3/4 is also kind of decent for having an on the play. And the on the play just being the Mickey Mouse effect of adding the top card of your deck to an ink. I think there's lots of value in that. So I think these two really improve the deck.
I like that though. So we've been ramping into 5-drops that have been, ramping into Cogsworth, ramping into Beast are relevant, but I feel like it's not super core to the game plan that's happening like right now, especially Beast Tragic Hero. Because like if you're ramping into a 5-drop, often you're like, okay, ramp into my 5-drop wheel, right? Yep. And this one that comes in and puts that card into Inkwell, like that is, I feel like that's exactly what you want on that, like that sort of that greedy, aggressive sort of turbo wheel.
Yes.
Yeah, it just seems so good.
Yeah, so if Beast often would draw you this extra card, and then you would have one extra card to ink or play before you wheel, which it still kind of nets you one card, but when you are holy worlding, after that, maybe you'll have 6 or 7 cards available instead of 1 less. And that's not actually that impactful in comparison to having an extra ink available post wheel. So I think, yeah, Chicha and Donald completely significantly improve the deck, while Cusco is just maybe a slightly more efficient way to deal with items and locations. You could also play the 6-cost 3/5 Simba instead.
Simba. Yeah.
It only quests for 1, which is much worse. But it has 1 more willpower, and it doesn't give your opponent an ink. So the upside of Simba is, let's say you're on the draw. Just to give an example where it could be better, is on the draw, you go Quill turn 3, your opponent goes Castle turn 4. Now you would much rather not give them ink and have a 3/5 quest for 1 than give them an ink and have a 3/4 quest for 1. The upside of Cusco is, if you don't have anything to remove, having a 2-quester is much, much better than having the extra willpower. And maybe later in the game, also getting rid of a dime in a way where Tamatora can't get it back, that can come up. And if you have a lot of ink and you're again in a matchup where the removal is steel based, damage based, even the use 4 ink, get 1 resist on all of your characters can help you close out games. So there's still some debate to be had which one to include, but I think that's like a slight improvement. Nothing too special in comparison to what we had before, where you had to play Rise of the Titans.
All right. In our next entry, something titled New Deck Pog. What could that be? What a new deck? I feel like in Lorcana we just see the same decks over and over, set to set. They get a few additions here and there. You telling me there's another color combination?
Yeah,
Ink
so
combination?
this is something I haven't actually had the time to really test a lot yet myself, but it's one of the decks that also made top 8 in the Battle Bear tournament in Himmelsleuchten. And I don't think it was crazy well built, but I was really intrigued by the idea. Basically, I am very happy to now explore a new color combination, because yes, a lot of the time when you already have 4 sets of cards, then good established decks, maybe some of these decks get 1 or 2 new cards, and that's kind of it. But when a new set enables an entirely new archetype or color combination, I think that's really very exciting. And the idea of this one is basically being able to use your cards for very much, almost for tempo only, because at the end of the day, you can recover the value by playing a Clarabelle or the Remember Who You Are, but I think mainly the Clarabelle, which actually means before Emerald Sapphire was just lacking removal, right? You could maybe bounce it, but they replay it. But now it feels a little better to just bounce their cards if it means you can also get to draw cards, more cards, because they now have more cards in hand, which, okay, it still didn't remove the card entirely, it didn't banish the card, but now this card advantage from Clarabelle might enable you to win games off the tempo, which means, okay, they can replay the card, but it just won't be good enough. So it goes very heavy on ramping, using cards from hand to ramp with Bell and Tipo, and okay, also One Jump as a normal way to ramp, but also on these tempo-based bounce effect removal tools. So there's the 2-drop Mother Gothel, which has an effect on the play where if you pay 3 extra, you can bounce a character. You have the 6-drop Mother Gothel, which is it actually a 3/6 or is that wrong? It's a 4/6.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, because the deck image shows it as a 3/6, but I think it's a no, it is.
I thought it was a 3/6.
It's a 4/6. I used the wrong Gothel. There is a 3/6 Gothel in the game that I put into the deck, but it's not the one I wanted to play.
Is it the old Gothel? It's like a set 1 Mother Gothel?
Yeah, the one I put in is a 3/6 set 1 Gothel. But yeah, so the one I'm actually talking about is kind of like a Tremaine. It's the 6-cost 4/6 Inkable with Shift 4. That doesn't matter too much, but if you do end up playing this War Gothel, it also matters. And it says on the play, your opponent has to choose one of their characters to bounce back to their hand.
Mm-hmm.
So this deck can really leverage using cards off from your hand to quickly ramp, and then also removal tools in these Gothels, but also maybe the new You're Welcome, and leveraging the Muses with songs as a bounce effect that can also be helped out with the inclusion of Ice Block. So this is probably the deck I'm most excited to try out, just because it's something completely new, and I think the concept of winning off these tempo swings and then just recovering hand size with Clarabelle just sounds very, very promising and fun as well.
One day we're gonna get a Milo Thatch deck, and I'll be a happy man. This is a joke too. We saw Milo Thatch. We're like, oh, Sapphire Emerald, Milo Thatch, ramp, bounce everything back. Didn't end up working out, but I do think the deck that you described seems much better. So I'm excited to see it. Anyway, let's get your kind of tie it all together. What are your first thoughts on set 5? Does it seem very impactful? You think it will shake the metagame up a lot? And what do you? I think you mentioned that you're most excited for the Sapphire Emerald, but I was going to ask you what you were most excited for out of all of it.
Yeah, so I think the meta does get shaken up, but it's still, to a large extent, it will be the same or similar archetypes or combinations, which is why I'm so excited about Emerald Sapphire. I would say the deck, the first deck to beat, which it might take a little bit more time to really identify it as that, because we don't have this large amount of games and data to back that up. But I think the first deck to beat will probably be Ember Steel. But I'm excited to see if some of the Sheriff of Nottingham Sapphire decks ideas can work, but also especially about Emerald Sapphire.
My favorite, or what I'm most excited for, is after all this deck building, all this iteration, that Ruby Sapphire will still be, or Ruby Amethyst will just be an S tier deck with the same build or something like that. That happens every set. Ruby Amethyst really does fall out of favor in the beginning, in the early days of like a set, and then it kind of just comes back as this like Jund-esque, just like good mid-range deck.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that it did get some tools, and it will. I think maybe if it takes a back step for now, but it will probably find a way to adapt when everything settles down.
Yeah. Anyway, that is it for this week. I appreciate you all of you listening. There's a video version of this on YouTube at youtube.com/@Podcana. Hit subscribe while you're there. I'm at Brendan APG, and this is at Moyne_HS. I believe next week will be me and Kawa. I think no Moyne because he will be on vacation. But we'll keep you updated on how set 5 continues to play out, and we'll be talking a lot about Toronto and preparation next week, and probably some tournament reports and stuff after that. And we're very excited for the set 5 tournaments to actually hit. That should be really, really fun. Let us know what you think is the best deck in the metagame right now. What decks did we miss in our evaluation? And thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next week.